The air inside the factory at dawn always felt thick, tinged with metal and grease. The fluorescent lights flickered uncertainly as I stood by my station, elbows resting on cool steel. A shriek, a shift whistle, same as every day, signaled the end of our night's labor. Around me, the others stretched or rubbed their eyes, ready to file out into Tokyo's awakening streets. I was slower than the rest, dragging my feet, unwilling to face the day beyond these humming machines. The supervisor, a square-jawed man named Sato, was at the exit. "Kid, you're not slacking, are you?" he said in the half-joking, half-serious tone he reserved for the underperformers. I shook my head, buttoning my coat, just gathering myself. He raised an eyebrow, not quite hiding his skepticism. I caught my tired reflection in the oily window as I left, just another featureless worker among the dozens pouring outside, all draped in navy uniforms stained by honest labor. Outside, the Sumida River exhaled a faint, cold mist. My co-workers separated in quiet clumps, speaking in sleepy murmurs. "See you at the next shift if this rust bucket is still running." My boy's math teacher called again. "Boss's nephew's getting promoted, did you hear?" The little currents they created flowed away from me. As usual, I walked alone. Back home, the apartment was silent except for the rustle of my mother's morning paper. She never looked up when I entered. I slipped past her, dropped my shoes by the door, and pretended not to hear the sigh she gave. Mornings meant a few hours' sleep before starting my real work, the waste of time, as my father called it. My small bedroom, cluttered with cables and notepads, was the only place I belonged. I powered on my aging laptop, the screen's glow breathing a hint of hope across my comforter. I opened up my latest algorithm. I had written it with clumsy fingers, eyes blurring after hours of factory haze. Fractals unfolded in waves on the screen, sculpted from datasets I'd gathered on Tokyo's traffic flows. I pushed further, rendering patterns out of numbers, writing code that sang shapes and textures from the city's rhythm. I remembered the first time I had tried to explain all this at the family table. "Why would anyone pay to see pictures made out of numbers?" My father scowled, lifting his cup. "How will that feed you?" "It's not really pictures," I said, trying to be patient. "Data tells a story, art helps people see." He cut me off with a hard laugh. "Tokyo needs engineers and cashiers, not this." He gestured at my sketchbook, where neon polygons sprawled across the page. "Grow up, kid." My older brother had smirked. "Maybe you'll sell your scribbles to the robots." The memory still strung years later, worse each time it repeated. My mother never said anything. She'd just look away as if I were offering her something dangerous. In the mornings after my night shift, I coded until exhaustion. My work gained color, movement, even music. Data threads rising and falling, cities folding in and out of themselves. I posted samples online, hoping for a glint of approval, a scrap of recognition. Most days there was only silence or the occasional spammy compliment. But the work was the only real thing I had, and every time I was told to quit, I dug in deeper. When I started bringing a tablet to the break room just to scribble patterns, word got out quickly. One by one, the other workers took a turn ridiculing the idea. "What is it, abstract Pikachu?" or trying to beat AI at its own game. I felt like a child balancing on a fence post about to slip. But every pixel mattered to me. After 4 years of midnight shifts, rejections, and slow, careful study, I saved up enough to buy a one-way ticket across the city. I moved to a cramped capsule apartment in Shibuya where the rent cost twice as much and the walls were thin as rice paper. No familiar faces, no one to remind me every day of how small my dream was. With every yen I upgraded my skills. I paid for online courses, snatched time to attend cheap art lectures, mingled in the corners of data science meetups, even though my suit was always the oldest in the room. I freelanced for startups willing to risk a few coins on visualizations, stock traders, urban planners, fashion designers. Each job was smaller than I'd hoped but bigger than what I'd had before. Rejection was constant. If the algorithms failed, I received polite apologies. If they worked, credit always went to someone else, a coworker, a vendor, a friend of someone with a louder voice. The hardest moment came late one winter night. The power went out after I'd spent hours debugging a live model. My work unsaved was lost, a week of code erased. I sat in the dark and cried, not just for the project but because I understood in my chest that my life had become this, grinding failure with little hope of acknowledgement, much less triumph. But in the morning I started from scratch. I wrote cleaner, bolder code. I joined online forums, shared techniques, and created free tools for others. It was all invisible, unremarked, except for the slow rise in messages to my inbox. How did you do that? Can you show me? I answered every single question. For those brief exchanges, I felt human again. Months slipped by. Someone in Singapore used my work in a museum installation. Someone in London invited me, just online, never in person, to speak about code and art. I was paid little, but word spread in digital circles. Schemes I built for traffic minimization in Tokyo ended up on a university forum. A designer in Sapporo remixed my patterns into fabric. A Tokyo art gallery, modest but modern, invited me to install a piece for a public show. The message was polite but perfunctory: "We're interested. Can you deliver by next month?" I worked double time, coding between night shifts at a new logistics warehouse, sipping cheap coffee, pausing only to rinse my face in the bathroom mirror. I missed meals, survived on instant noodles and adrenaline. The gallery was only a single room and my budget was threadbare, but I wanted life to burst from those walls. The installation was a living mural, a projection of Tokyo's pulse, traffic, conversations, city humidity, all feeding a tapestry in real time. Colors twisted and swelled, shapes flickered with data from subways, phones, the very air. Visitors could touch a panel and send their own heartbeats into the current, adding ripples to the city's pattern. I watched from a distance as people laughed, argued, and even wept in front of it. Opening night, I didn't invite my family. I believed they'd only come to confirm their disappointment. It was a full year after that show before I saw any real break. A curator from the Mori Art Museum visited, pressed my hand, explained, very politely because it was Tokyo after all, that she wanted to commission a series for a new exhibit. It would pay well, she said. Finally, you're someone, is what I heard. I sank everything into that work, my savings, my sleep, my faith. For the first time, I could afford an actual studio above an old ramen shop. The landlord grumbled about noise but let me use the old storage room for free. I set up projectors, cables, borrowed half the equipment from friends. I hired 2 assistants, underpaid but eager, for help sourcing datasets and soldering the panels. For months, Tokyo receded. The exhibition took shape, 3 immense projections merging weather streams, train routes, the flicker of internet packets across the city. When it was ready, the Mori's PR team went overboard, blanketing every arts site in Japan. Urban data in motion, Tokyo's living canvas. My name suddenly was everywhere. The weekend before the show's opening, I went home for the first time in years. My mother's hair had gone white. My father was just as stoic, his body shrunk a little. My brother was visiting with his own son, who clutched a Nintendo Switch at the table and barely looked up. Dinner was polite, strained around the edges. "So you're still doing that art on the computer?" my brother asked without malice. "I have an exhibit at Mori," I said quietly. He looked surprised. "The Mori Art Museum." "Yes." My father put down his chopsticks. He didn't ask for details, but I saw the way he stared at the table, as if searching for a crack. That Monday evening, I sent 3 invitations via email. My mother replied 2 days later. "We may come if work allows." That was all. Friday came, opening night. The Mori gleamed silver against a rainy sky, glass and concrete glistening with city light. I pressed my hands to my suit, better, newer, the first I'd ever bought for myself, and shuffled into a hall filling with strangers, critics, and curious onlookers. I lingered in the shadows offstage during the opening speech, sweating under the hot lighting. My name was announced, polite applause, small camera flashes. I nodded to the crowd, looked for familiar faces, saw none. The first wave of the show. Buzzing lights, huge images pulsing across curved walls. Visitors stepped inside the projection, their outlines meshing with city grids, weather lines dancing over their arms. The data shifted to their movement, the city listening, responding. I was explaining the concept to a knots of students when I saw my family. My father in a worn suit, my mother hugging her purse, my brother's son wide-eyed, nearest the wall of swirling lights. They stood uncertainly at the perimeter as if the room might collapse around them. I approached quietly. "Thank you for coming." My father grunted, not meeting my eye. My mother smiled faintly for the first time in years. "What is it supposed to be?" my brother's son asked. "The city," I said, "but every piece here is alive, it changes. This," I pointed at the wall, "is ice station's ticket flow, mixed with wind in Shibuya and messages sent from this room. When you step close, it shifts." He stared, then tentatively reached out an arm. The projected light swam across his sleeve, picking up the rhythm from his pulse. His mouth formed a silent wow. My mother, overcome, brushed a tear from her eye. A white-haired critic with a notebook sidled up, asking questions about the algorithms. I tried to respond, glancing at my parents who looked more bewildered now. The crowd thinned, grew dense again, parted around my family, uncertain what to do with them. Midway through the evening, an older man approached my father. "Are you the artist's father?" My father hesitated, then nodded. The man smiled broadly. "Your child is brilliant. I've never seen Tokyo shown this way." My father bowed, embarrassed. "Thank you." That small, public acknowledgement seemed to shift something in him. He watched the data swirl, felt the murmurs, the phones aimed, the visible awe of strangers. At the end of the evening, I found my father standing close to the wall, hands trembling in his pockets. My mother joined him, her eyes red, my brother silent. "So, this is what you were working on all those years," my father said softly. "Yes, this is it." He nodded slowly. "It's beautiful. I never understood." The museum's director approached, shook my hand, praised my innovative vision, but I barely heard. My father lingered close, protecting me with his silence, as if finally understanding how hard the distance had been for us both. After the crowds left, I stood alone by the window overlooking Roppongi Hills. The city was a data stream beyond glass, trains and neon signs and the glowing wash of life. I felt relief, pride, grief all braided together. My family left before me that night. My father, in parting, gripped my shoulder just once firm. In the weeks that followed, the exhibit drew record crowds. My email overflowed with requests, collaborations, commissions, interviews. My brother sent a text, "You're famous now." Even the old guard at the factories talking about it. Finally, I was invited back to that same factory for a seminar on new digital skills. Sato Greer, still taught, welcomed me. At the end of the session, they brought me to the break room, now decorated with a huge printout of one of my works. Some of the old crew, those who had sneered at my tablet sketches, lined up for autographs. It was strange to see their pride just as shallow as the scorn had once been. Strange but satisfying. I smiled for their cameras, shook hands, never letting them see the wounds underneath. That night I wandered the city, tracing old routes, past the apartment where my mother once waited with silent judgment, the cheap ramen place where I'd coded through hunger, the river where I'd walked at dawn, lonelier than now. The lights of Tokyo were warmer, infinite, alive. I thought of those who still doubted, knew they would always exist somewhere, but I was no longer a stranger to myself. It took loss to remake me, and absence to show me where I belonged. Now, wherever I stood, I could see the city's pattern unfolding, one I had written myself, out of years of struggle and every piece of proof that I was here and that I mattered.